Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Tuesday, July the 21st in the Memorial Arena in Victoria, BC. I'd like to start by thanking the volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this program happen every week. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walter and Jack show, so we'll start off. Right now in the BC legislature, they are discussing this massive and destructive Petronas giveaway betrayal bill. And it is almost an unprecedented disaster for British Columbia. I just want to hold up this, I'm always talking about the media. I'll just hold up this story from the Globe and Mail. Walter, can you read the headline?
LNG bill sets stage for Liberal NDP fight.
Right, so how does the media work in a story like this? So first of all, who owns the Globe and Mail? The Globe and Mail is owned by the Thompson family, which is Canada's wealthiest family. So to start with, we're getting the absolute #1 corporate point of view. That's who they represent. They don't work for us. They're not there to tell us the truth. They're not there to tell us the news. They're there to represent the corporate point of view. The whole story does not mention, it goes on to the next page as well, it does not say the word fracking. And fracking is what the entire LNG industry is completely 100% based on. All the natural gas that they're talking about is going to come from fracking. So this bill is about fracking British Columbia. So you have the corporations, corporate Canada, who tells our government to allow this to happen. And then you have the media, which presents the story in a way that works for them but not for us. And it says, it sets the stage for a Liberal NDP fight. Well, that's not, it's just part of their story. There is no Liberal NDP fight. The Liberals and the NDP work together under their corporate domination to keep us in check. They both parties work against the citizenry. The NDP, and as a member of the NDP, I'm embarrassed to say this, the NDP leadership, not the NDP membership, the NDP membership is opposed to fracking and therefore opposed to LNG. But the NDP leadership supports fracking. So it brings us to this fundamental question of what is going on in our democracy when an issue of life and death, because that's what fracking is, it's the poisoning of our water and our land and our air and people and all of nature. It's the poisoning of everything for corporate profit. And we have to ask ourselves, who do our politicians work for when they're willing to betray us and sell us out to this extent? And in a way, it's not even their fault. Like my MLA, Carol James, as a NDP MLA, she has to support fracking, because if she doesn't, even though the majority of her membership does, then she will be disciplined by the party leadership. So the problem is, if Carol James wants to change and start to act more democratically, she has to pay a price. And that's what we have to change. We have to change the political system so that our MLAs, and at every level of government, federally, provincially, and municipally, have to start to do what the public wants, not what the opportunistic and often corrupt leadership of the party wants. Whew.
Well, I agree with you, Jack, but in politics, you get elected and you're supposed to have some kind of an agenda, some type of platform that you ran on that you could try to carry out during your term and try to achieve something. That's almost impossible under this type of system with political parties. Now, we mentioned before, I think, what's a step in the right direction. Firstly, abolishing political parties would be probably the best way to go. But in the interim, we have to reduce the power of the leaders and all that. And one way is the leader cannot interfere, and they can't whip you into every vote. That sometimes you're going to take a position that the party doesn't like, and they have to live with it. But the thing is about, I was listening to an interview with Michael Smith interviewing the NDP energy critic whose name escapes me, and he mentioned that in his criteria of criticizing the LNG project, one thing was, of course, protecting the environment, the air, land, and sea, I guess. And but that's the only mention of the environment that ever came out in the whole interview. The NDP's position on LNG is we're just not getting enough out of it. The government's not getting enough out of royalties and taxes. That's all the problem they have with it.
Yep.
So they've just abandoned every other value, including, I think, the values of most of their membership, to go ahead with this crazy deal. Now, I was reading the paper. Can I just read a couple of paragraphs? Because I think the other thing that we should look at is, who are you doing business with here? Remember when Harper signed that deal with the Chinese government, this long-term deal in Alberta, and they realized that they were not just dealing with a large corporation. This is a deal you're signing with a government, and governments have special powers over and above what a corporation even has. Well, the Petronas energy company is fully owned by the Malaysian government. And the Malaysian government is just about as crooked and, well, should I say crooked, just as questionably honest, let's say, and as the Chinese regime, you know,
or the Harper regime.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're dealing with some pretty nasty,
and so are they.
Pretty nasty people. So a letter to the editor.
Just before you read it, I'll put the corruption level of the Canadian government just about at the level of most other governments in the world.
Well, you pretty well have to be in order to do business with these guys.
And they have to be in order to do business with us.
Exactly. Well, anyway, a letter here to the editor from a person by the name of Mia Ang, ex-citizen of Malaysia. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but in a couple of paragraphs here, she says, the country is rocked by a series of financial scandals. The biggest is exposed by the Wall Street Journal, is an alleged transfer of $700 million U.S. from Malaysia's state investment fund into the Prime Minister's personal bank account. The thing is that Petronas is putting money into that account. And she goes on to say here that Transparency International ranked Malaysia as the most corrupt country for business in 2012 bribe payers survey. Petronas is wholly owned by the Malaysian government. It contributes as much as 45% to the government's total annual revenue, and has been leaned on to bail out failed government enterprises in the past. But basically what we're talking about here is we're making a deal with the Malaysian government, has very questionable business practices, seems obviously quite corrupt in their government practices. And we're signing this long-term deal with these guys. We're getting in bed with some pretty nasty folks. So do they share the values of most Canadians? And, you know, is this a good deal for Canadians? It's just a rotten deal. How could this ever possibly be a good idea? So there's no way of defending the deal. And I think you've touched on the issues around how the media is just not covering this properly. Most people are in the dark on this deal. And we don't have an opposition in this province. We have this appendage that hangs off the Liberal Party.
When I say that to people, they say, no, the NDP does oppose this bill, and they do, but they oppose the details. They're talking about a few more jobs, and there's not really a lot of jobs here, and more revenue, but fracking is poisoning the province, and the whole industry is based on fracking. And the membership of the NDP does not support fracking. Therefore, there's something very, very wrong when the leadership of the NDP does support fracking. I think that's a fundamental issue that we have got to deal with. We've got to, if our political parties don't even represent what we want when they know very well what we want, then what hope do we have? And we've got to focus on that issue and correct it so that our governments start to represent what we want. It's fundamentally important.
And you have to have some vision. That's the other side of it, Jack, is that I agree that they should be representing the people, but also when you run for politics and you have values and you have ideas and things you want to see happen, maybe the public is not up to speed to this, with those ideas, you know, and you want to proceed with that agenda. Well, you can use your influence and use the, you know, your ability to communicate to the public to persuade the public to have a better idea on something. This is not happening anymore. We have public relations firms writing the whole script for everybody in government, the governing party as well as the opposition. There's no fresh ideas. There's nothing happening that's spontaneous. It's just a charade that they call the government now.
It is a charade, and boy, I'll just mention the Saanich spyware case. Now, how long has it been? January, February, March, April, May, June, July. 7 months, and it's like there's nothing we can do. It's almost like they're rubbing it in everybody's face and say, yeah, we can, whoever we are, we can just do whatever we want.
We can break the law, is what they did. They broke the law.
Yeah, it looks like break the law, and
Yeah.
and there's nothing you, the citizen, can do about it. We are just going to continue. The implications really are scary, and
Yeah. In Saanich, hopefully memories will be long enough that when they come around to the next election.
Yeah, that's where we have to wait 4 years now.
Yeah.
And of course there's it's just not right that this can happen, because essentially when the government and the bureaucrats are completely out of control, then what can you hope for but a totally corrupt and undemocratic system?
Well, Jack, I'm optimistic. I think that Saanich Council could just get cleaned out in the next election. Richard Atwell ran a great campaign against Frank Leonard. And Frank was entrenched. He had been the mayor for 150 years or something. So, and he had to come forward with some good, fresh ideas, and they elected him mayor. And I think more people that are honest and really concerned about the public good should run for Saanich Council, bring forward good values and ideas, and I think you'd sweep that crowd right out of there. I really hope that happens.
And myself, I think that we need more fundamental changes. We've got to have a way. So let's say in the spyware case, I mean, the Saanich City Council produced a report in which they say there is no evidence of any attempt to target the mayor. I think that's what the report said. But Focus Magazine has a whistleblower who was at a meeting where he was told, we're putting spyware on the mayor's computer and we're putting it on other computers as well, so it'll look like the mayor isn't being targeted.
Yeah.
So when you have, this guy says there's no evidence, and yet the evidence exists, but it doesn't matter. The public has got to have, I don't know the way to do it, but the public has got to have a way to step in, perhaps with an independent prosecutor or something like that, and just say, no, that's not good enough. There is evidence, and therefore this has to be moved forward in a court of law or some kind of court, and we have to have a full and open, with people testifying under oath, public inquiry, because if we don't, then we're just sinking deeper into a very, very bad morass.
Really, if they had any integrity, they would resign. I'm not joking about that. The people involved in this should resign and then clear their names, but they don't have to. They just simply can sit in their little cushy chairs in Saanich Council and pretend that they're looking out after the public good.
So what we really need a debate, a discussion about how to improve things. And I don't know how that can happen, but I wish it would happen. It's got to happen. Just how do you deal with a problem where your city council can do these kinds of things, and there's no independent way to stop them. The story, I mean, so much is going on. The food banks in Alberta now, that's the story in the media, are exploding. You know, that's, I mean, why are there any food banks in this country? And the only reason is because the people who run the country want food banks. They also want high house prices. That's why we have high house prices. Everything we have is not because, you know, it's the economic rule and this is what has to happen. It's because somebody's making a lot of money out of it. If you could buy a house for $100,000 a few years ago and now you're paying $400,000, somebody is making that money and you're in debt for it. And it's all part of the same problem. And if we can't solve it, well, who knows where we're going? Do you want to talk about Mr. Topp, or do you want to move on to other things?
Well, you know, what we should do, Jack, I think, to be fair, is that, you know, we had a little discussion about Brian Topp and his activities the last several years and how he was involved in the failed election attempt for the NDP in the last...
and he was the campaign manager in the last provincial
That's right.
election. Yeah.
But I think, to be fair, I think we should maybe dedicate more time for him and to really look at what's happened with Brian Topp in the last several years and how he keeps showing up in different places. Now, for instance, he was the campaign manager for Adrian Dix, heavily criticized for really taking some very peculiar steps during that campaign. That
losing Sherbet.
That's right, but to the point that it looked like a fixed election. And I wrote an article on that. I'll still stand by every word of it. I think Brian Topp was the quarterback in fixing that election. Now he's in Alberta. He's Rachel Notley's chief of staff. So he keeps showing up in these different positions.
Just about the most important NDP position in the country right now,
Yeah.
especially with a federal election coming up, because what she does is so important in the federal election. And she was put in place. I mean, you know, the media destroyed, I can't remember the previous Alberta, Alison Redford, the media destroyed her, you know, because she spent some money on airplane flights and was going to build an apartment. The governments of Alberta have poisoned that province for decades and given away all the money. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. That went unreported by the media. But when they want to get rid of Alison Redford in a couple of months, she's gone right out of political life. You know, so that's the power of the media.
Well, there's also very troubling things about how public relations people manipulate election campaigns, particularly, and their association with the pollsters and all that. And there's been a lot of shenanigans that happened in BC and Alberta over the last few elections that really shows that they were less than honest in their polling. And it really was peculiar how who won and who lost in some of those elections. Very irregular things happened in those elections. And now we have this situation with the NDP now trying to pick up the pieces in Alberta. And all I can say is, boy, Alberta must be in trouble if they elected an NDP government. Think about it. You know, this is a huge shift. And I think the powers that be in Alberta have decided to allow the NDP to come in and try to pick up these pieces and maybe after a while be blamed for a lot of it. And but the guys that made all the money are laughing all the way to the bank.
And we're laughing all the way to the bank, too. I wish we had a bank. Walter, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, Jack.
And thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.